Hey Ashley,
What's up, Meg?
how are you? I want to ask you something that gets asked to me a lot. In fact, I just had an advisor write to me the other day on LinkedIn and ask me. He said he had a client, a woman, widowed, in her, I think she was in her 60s, and if she was going to continue to spend at the rate that she was spending, she was definitely going to have like millions of dollars left. And he, as the advisor, felt like she could be having more fun. And he feels like he has maybe tried to approach that, like, hey, you could spend more. And I think that there was some fear there a little bit of just like, hey, well, I don't want my kids to take care of me when I'm old, and I don't want this to happen. We just got a blender. Um,
Woohoo! Yeah!
over here.
Got a blend.
Yay,
I got a
blenders.
blender.
Everybody has
Guest
a.
appearance, guest appearance. Yes.
Okay. So, I won't need a blender when I'm a widow. I'll have one.
You will.
Um, one less thing. And but he wanted to approach the subject, be able to be able to meet her where she was at in the sense of, yeah, like women are living longer all the time, but we want to live healthy. She didn't want her kids to take care of her, but he also was like, she's going to have so much money. Like this is not going to be a problem. How do I get her to spend more money? So, what would you say, Ashley? How would you
Yeah.
spend more money?
So the underspending is something that, yes, comes up, I think, a lot for me. And that kind of framework around how do I get them to spend more money? Like my first response to that, and I have to be careful sometimes with like how I say it, but this is a safe space. Like my first response is like, you can't get them to do anything. Nor should that be, and this is a judgment, but it's like, nor should that be, the goal, like, or the objective here. And so I'm, you know, criticizing like kind of the language that's being used. And some of that's just intentional because I do think if that's the mindset, right, we're already maybe not off to a great start
Mm,
with maybe helping like the client. So like my first kind of response is like, we can't get them to do anything. Um, and is it okay if they are like underspending? Like, is there actually anything wrong here? There are some clients that I've worked with that they live like very, very modestly, and through that have accumulated a lot. And there is not a longing, like desire to actually spend more because it's not, you know, consistent, congruent. It doesn't match like their values. And so um, I think like kind of doing a little bit of maybe it's some like kind of internal like thinking
hmm
through like, is it okay for this client to not spend more? What do they value? Let's just say maybe like they're not spending, and there is like a, okay, you say that you value travel, or charitable giving, like you want to be able to give back, and or you value travel, but we're not doing it. Then I think that's where like we can come in and like do some work. But I think like if we kind of think about it like a decision tree, right? Do you need new shoes? Yes or no, right? Like I know our answers are always yes. Right? But like, is it okay? Like, does this client actually need to like spend like more? I just think like there are some kind of branches to kind of go off like kind of
Yeah.
from there. So I don't know. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think you're brilliant. Because I do think that baked into that question a lot of times that advisors will ask me or ask us is the advisor feeling some guilt? That
Oh,
like oof, this client has all this money and I feel like if it was me and I had all that money, I'd be out buying a yacht, like whatever it is you think you're going to be doing. And, so you think you're looking at this client and they could be having more fun. They could be spending more. They could be buying all the shoes. They could be doing these things and they're not. But to your point, have they expressed wanting to do anything? And if they haven't, and they're happy with their life and their four pairs of shoes versus 204 pairs of shoes, then, you know, let them live their life. But if they have expressed, so, I guess the first step is separating, is it you, the advisor, and potentially feeling some guilt or feeling like you just want to re-energize the relationship or whatever, like, but you're feeling some sort of pull, and is the question of, can I get them to spend more coming from there, or is this client actually commonly saying things like, oh yeah, it'd be so nice to travel, oh yeah, it'd be so nice to give whatever to this charity I care about, oh yeah, I'd love to, buy my kids something. um, in those moments when there's this sort of unexpressed need, being put out there, this sort of, or not unexpressed need, an expressed need being out there, then I definitely think that, because you will still have that where clients are like, yeah, I know I want to go to Europe for 3 months, but if I came back or if something happened, then I don't know that I'd be able to do it. Okay. So there's still people that will push back. And I think we should be very clear that whatever we say next is about that. It's not about the advisor feeling some sort of weird guilt. You can talk to Ashley and I about that at a different day. But like today, we're talking about the client that wants to do the thing, but is still feeling like some hesitation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I've had like there's a client scenario that comes to mind, like a couple where, and I'm you see this too, like the male, they've accumulated like a great deal of wealth. They're like coming into this like new chapter of less work, more fun, and things like that, i.e. retirement, and the husband's like totally game for like spending more. Like
They
now's
are.
the
Of
time,
course they
right?
are.
Of course, yeah. And maybe one of the ways is like, hey, we've always valued travel, but now when we travel, like, you know what? Like, I'm getting up there in age. Like, I want to fly business class. Like, our
Ooh,
if we go to Europe, like, I'm tired of sitting in between two other people and having zero room and getting off a plane and feeling awful. We have the financial means, ability, more than to be able to do that, right? And so, but then the other partner's like, "Ugh," like I want to be able to enjoy, and I don't know how to. And so then the default, right, might be, at least in this couple, like, we're gonna not then spend on those things, and then we are perpetually, right, like underspending, right? So clients, to your point, if it's like, I want to be able to enjoy it, I don't know how because it makes me uncomfortable. And as a result, I am, in this pattern of like underspending. What would you say then, right? Like, how do we respond? Like, how do we start? Where's the starting point maybe then for helping clients work through that?
one of my favorite things, and I actually learned this in therapy a long time ago for my own self, is I love any sort of experiment. Like,
Mm,
okay, couple, let's run an experiment. Let's book the flight. Let's pay for the good seats. You only have to do it once. If you get back and you don't like it, we don't ever have to do it again. But like, let's run through an experiment and just get them to commit to one time. Because there is something about like, oh, well, if I start doing business class, then I'm only going to eat at these Michelin restaurants and I'm
yeah.
buying all the shoes and matching bags. Like, people feel sometimes that it's like
Hmm.
this slippery slope where now all of their decisions are going to be infected. And like, this is just going to be the new normal.
I know,
And like,
yeah.
we don't have to do that. And so I think that the other thing that can help is that some people will say, okay, fine, we'll do the business class. But then when they're there in Europe, they won't let themselves buy the shoes. They won't let themselves buy the Louis bag. And so it's like, I want you to go on this vacation. I want you to do all the things. that you want to do, including buying the nice, seats and including buying the bag, you have this budget and I want you to spend every last dime of it and then get them to go. The trick now is when they get back, you need to meet and immediately talk about it. How did
Yeah.
that feel? What was that like? Was it hard? Do you feel regret, about any of the things? Do you feel like some of the things you want to do again? Because that is the fun part about the experimentation is you don't have to get it right. We
Yeah, yeah.
expect some things to not be perfect and we expect some things to go really well. And so let's actually figure out like where you really enjoy spending the money. Maybe you got there and your husband who had wanted the more expensive seats is like, I didn't sleep anyway, and the food was gross.
Yeah.
So, like, let's just go back to these other seats. Okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe, you bought the bag and did the things, and you're just like, yeah, I like this bag, but it's just going to go on the shelf with my other 26 bags. Probably didn't need the bag. Okay, whatever. So now we've
But I did
parked.
like the flight. I did like the
It's like
seats
the
and
flight.
visit. I loved that pod and being able to like,
And
yes,
yeah.
yeah,
So, but like let's figure it out what we like because people are horrible future forecasters. You
yeah,
believe it or not are super crappy. Your clients are super crappy. Everybody is super crappy at guessing what they will like or not like. So just create the opportunity to say like, all right, we're going to experiment. Here's your budget. I want you to spend every single dime of this budget, and when you get back, we will talk about what worked and what didn't work, what really felt like it was the value, and what was it. And then next time we'll plan like that, and we'll just keep it rolling in terms of what we like and what we don't like, and that way we don't have to commit to anything fully, but we can certainly open ourselves up to try different things.
yeah, yeah. I am glad you mentioned around the, future, right? Kind of forecast, like how will I feel or what will the impact um, be? And, you know, it's not uncommon. Like we generally don't think it's going to be positive, right? Like most
Right.
of the time our brain is like, it's going to be like terrible and awful and doom or gloom. It reminds me of my trophy husband Clayton, and shockingly, has been was for a very chronic underspender. From my opinion standpoint, he would argue that. And I remember like a point in time when we had saved like cash, like to be able to renovate our kitchen, like full gut renovation, like everything. We had the cash to do it. And I remember him having like anxiety around, okay, even though we saved and we had the cash, like if we spend this, our net worth is going to tank. Like, and I just don't know like if it's going to be worth it and blah, like all these things. I'm being slightly dramatic here, but most like, that was some of his working framework. Fast forward, we spend the money, we get through the renovation, we love it. And guess what? Our net worth didn't tank that year. Actually, in fact, our net worth went up despite the fact of spending the money that we did, right? That's mostly in part thanks to markets and stuff. But the thing that he thought was going to happen actually didn't. And so I think that what you're saying is so valuable in that after, let's just say the trip in this example, like after the trip, we do need to meet very soon thereafter and debrief. And how was that? How did it feel? What went well? What did you maybe, what surprised you like most positively, like not so positively? And that can really then help build confidence too for those underspenders, right? Of like, oh, I kind of did this thing and like the world didn't fall apart. And we still have money and I'm okay. And I enjoyed that. And it's okay that I enjoyed that
Hmm.
as well. So there's a lot kind of there to unpack. Any other like just kind of takeaways or like things that when it comes to like underspenders that you think are maybe are just kind of like important things to kind of note, mention, keep in mind?
Well, I think so. To the point that you made earlier, like a lot, like actually both made in the very beginning, that a lot of times people wind up with all this money because they've been conservative spenders. They've saved. They're not living these flashy lives, and they're relatively happy doing that. And even though now they recognize they're at a point where they could do some other things and maybe they would like to do some other things, there is this doom and gloom about what could happen, and there is just the habit of doing what they have always done. So even though people are very bad future forecasters, another fun thing to play with in talking to clients about stuff like this is the future. You could say, okay, Ashley, I want you to close your eyes for a second, and I want you to imagine that you go on the trip. We're going to buy the expensive tickets. We're going to get the bag. You're going to book the place at the Michelin restaurant. We're going to stay at the Ritz 2 nights. We're going to go all out. We're going to get back, and you're going to have loved it. Loved it.
Yes.
It's going to be great. Now, knowing that, I want you to imagine that now your next trip is on the horizon. Would you go back? Would you go back to not staying at the Ritz? Would you not buy the bag? Would you not go to the Michelin place? Would you buy the cheap plane tickets?
Probably would.
Super happy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I might say I don't need to stay at the Ritz, but the plane, like arriving, being comfortable, like, hey, that made a difference sleep wise, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
didn't enjoy the food that I wanted to. I probably would get, a few more, cafes or whatever, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point, right? Kind of doing that kind of vision, work, and
And then it was
seeing.
great. And then saying,
Yeah,
you go back to the old way of doing it. And you'd be surprised what people will say, because they'll do what you just did. There might be one or two things that they'd be like, well, I probably wouldn't do this. Okay, whatever. This was a
cool.
hypothetical. But either way, you went, you spent all the money, and you did all the
Yeah, yeah,
things, and you had a great time.
yeah.
And so now, even though we might change one or two things, you can still go back to the idea of, let's experiment with this then. Let's actually find out, what you would like or what you don't like. Um, there is just something about that, using the future self, and having that be joyful, having that be engagement, having that be, comfort, or whatever it is, whatever sort of opposite of the doom thing that they're thinking of. And or also framing it as, an experiment. Let's try it like this, or let's, and it doesn't have to be like a trip. You could literally just say, okay, how about for the next 4 months, instead of putting $7,000 in your account, I'm going to put $20,000 in your account. And I want you to spend all of it. We're just going to do it for just 3 months, but I want you to do it. I want you to spend every single dime each time. After 3 months, we'll come back, and then we're going to talk about, like, was that hard? Or did after 3 months you were like, spending this money is easy? Or did you have, I think my husband just might have brought me a margarita. Perfect.
Oh, come on. God dang. Cheers. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
That's one of the
Yeah.
benefits of it being almost 4 o'clock here.
Jeez,
It's not
yeah.
as weird.
No.
So, but I think that it's, so I'm going to put 20,000 in your account. I want you to spend all of it. We're going to do this for 3 months. Because again, 3 months is not very long. And if the client's like, oh,
No.
3 months, what? It's $60,000, just like that. Okay, we'll do it for 2 months. Fine. Save you
Yeah.
33%. Now, but still, you want them to experience it, because they're still going to come back from that and say, like, "Ugh, I could not go out to eat anymore.
Yeah.
Like, or I, ended up buying my kids stuff and I didn't even need to buy my kids stuff, whatever. They're going to come back with, like, things that they just found that they were spending money to spend money because you told them that they had to spend all the money, and that they weren't really enjoying it. But up to what point were they not enjoying it?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, did they spend 10, 12, and they thought, hot damn, this is pretty nice? Or, and then
Yeah.
only after that was it just like, this is superfluous? Or, was it just like, I only really needed to spend my 7 grand, there was nothing else? Okay, but at least now we have data to work with. We have
Mhm.
emotional data to work with. We have physical data to work with. Like, what are they actually spending money on? And then you can play with it from there. Okay, well, you really liked, when you were doing this,
You were
you know,
able to go to the chiropractor and the spa and whatever, right? Like, once a month,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
you really liked being able to do that. There was benefit, right? Yeah, kind
Let's
of
go
there.
twice.
Yeah,
Or let's go with if you don't want to go twice because you think, oh, this is a nice treat, what about you bring your friend? You advisors know that one of the biggest things that bring happiness is to do things with people.
for
And
sure.
so, if you can, if they have the money, bring a friend, spend the
Yeah,
money, do it.
yeah,
But you got to get them to try. And I
yeah.
think sometimes that experimental language of like, we're just going to do this for a month. We're just going to do this for this one vacation. We're going to try this for this point in time. You can usually get people to do just about
Easily.
anything.
I think you mentioned the phrase emotional data, and I guess maybe the last thing that I would mention, and this is probably a whole separate like conversation, but I do think that it is. I do think it's important to note is that for some people who are underspenders, there is an identity component
Mm,
there.
yeah.
Like I need to feel responsible, or I this is who I am, right? And for some there is, and like for some there is not. Uh, and I think that might be important to just kind of explore, right? If it's like there's resistance, like I could see like if there's resistance to like some of these experiments, or you're just getting like a lot of resistance, that might be data for you, emotional data for you and for them of like, hey, is there anything around like identity, like being a responsible person? I am a responsible person, or I am a saver, right? Is there anything like there that might be coming up and showing up and, you know, perpetuating, right, just kind of this underspending. So I'll just kind of leave that there. That is like you get into like talking about identity, and like that's a whole other thing, but like I do think that for underspending in particular, like that can be at play.
You can ask, so certainly ask you when people get back, if you can get them to do whatever. But when you go to describe what will probably be, you should be superfluous on purpose. Like make it more extravagant because you know they're not going to do it. So make it as extravagant as you want. You can always say to the person, "Tell me how that makes you feel." Like as I describe that, what emotions are coming up for you? And
Yeah, yeah.
people will respond in the exact way that Ashley just said. They'll say, "Oh, well, that feels like I'm being reckless, or that feels like I'm being irresponsible, or that feels like I'm whatever." They'll say all kinds of things. And depending on how comfortable you feel, you can either demonstrate, your finances support that. It would not necessarily be reckless or irresponsible. I realize it feels different,
Mhm.
and listening to the differences, but different doesn't. I love Dr. Joy Leary. I work with her. You know her as well. She's brilliant. One of the things that she says is just because it feels uncomfortable, because it's different, doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there's a difference between uncomfortable and wrong. Sometimes when things are new and it feels a little bit uncomfortable, it can take some time to get used to it. So again, to the very point that we made in the very beginning, we can't make anybody do anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Being willing to use some of this experimental language, collect some emotional data, be able to be open to talking through that, what that might look like, how is that feeling, separating different from bad, and just saying that different is different, and can feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. And if you get back from this thing and we debrief, then we can actually figure out like what did feel good, what didn't, and go from there, which is still more data than we have today.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Lots of great nuggets and takeaways here when it comes to working with clients who may be stuck in underspending, or maybe they're not stuck and it's just okay for them to be there, there too. So we hope that some of this was helpful, maybe for you as you're thinking about clients where underspending might show up, or just be a concern or question that you might have or be wondering about. And hey, we appreciate all the support listening. Meg's got a margarita. I've got a coffee. We will just sign off with saying cheers to you and whatever you are drinking right now or will be drinking later.
We hope it's something good.
I hope so.